Okay, good morning, everyone, from a very cool Guangdong province today. Yesterday, our weather turned and we dropped from mid-20s in centigrade down to I think about 6 today. Would that be right, Greg?
Yeah, 5 when I woke up about 5:30 this morning, actually. 5
You
degrees.
you were up well before me. Anyway, today my guest is Greg Warren. He's an Australian, and although there are a few people, I don't meet many of them who have been in China longer than me. I'm coming up to 20 years. Greg, you came here in 1999, is that right?
Correct. November 99, I started work here.
Okay, and tell us, what do you do here?
Okay, my background is in ceramics manufacture, and a previous boss had a factory here in Zhongshan, and he was looking for somebody to help him with the production. So he called me, and I came for a trip to have a look. A very naive, uninformed person about China, and saw the factory was pretty much the same as what we would run overseas, and the opportunity was good to run the factory and learn some more about the operation, and I came on that basis.
Even in 1999?
1999.
But were you uninformed then?
I can say I was unknowledgeable about China. I knew China. I knew Deng Xiaoping and some of the history, but I didn't understand what position China was economically or development-wise, and was surprised when I came here, basically to see people dressed the same as we were in the Western world, and life carrying on with people going out for dinner and whatnot, the same as we would do over in Australia.
All right. Well, the reason for us, one of the reasons, we're going to talk about Zhongshan, because we both live in Zhongshan, which is in the GBA, or the Greater Bay Area, and that's a group of cities, a cluster of cities, which are based around the Pearl River, or the Pearl River Delta. It used to be known as the PRD. But just today, and I'm talking really hot off the press today, less than an hour ago, the Guangdong Provincial 2 sessions got underway. And the government work report is saying that the GDP of our region, Guangdong Province, which does not include Hong Kong and Macau, has reached 13.5 trillion RMB, ranking first in China for the 35th year in a row. So 13.5 trillion, let me put that into perspective, is almost exactly the same as the GDP of Australia. So one province of China, excluding Hong Kong and Macau, one province of China is doing about the same as the whole of Australia. Now, in Australia, there's only 26, 27 million people. So there's a lot more people here. One of the questions that I have about this incredible amount for one province is, imagine a state of Canada or a state of the USA with a $2 trillion. I think California probably does, but there wouldn't be too many that have that kind of GDP. It grew at 4.8%, while the rest of China grew at 5.2%. Any suggestions on why that might have happened?
If you look back traditionally, Guangdong province development hasn't happened in the last 5 minutes. It's happened over the last 50-odd years. When Deng Xiaoping decided to open up China, and he set up Zhuhai near to Macau and Shenzhen near to Hong Kong as the developing areas, the areas he wanted to open up. You had other areas of China that were very, very poor and lived on farming, and all of those other parts didn't really have the access to that opening up, but they could come here and work. And therefore, millions, absolutely millions, made their way to Guangdong province. And you had, I think, about 13 million people a year were traveling backwards and forwards to earn money here in Guangdong and send it back for their families back home. And that means that the huge workforce at a relatively low pay rate was able to develop Guangdong from 50 years ago. So it didn't happen overnight.
No.
And I think in more recent times, more of the development has gone on in central and western China, and people don't have to leave their homes so much anymore. So the growth in Guangdong is maybe affected by that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very, very accurate assessment. I would describe it as it's not quite saturation, but in terms of infrastructure facilities, Zhongshan is a long way behind places like Shenzhen, as you probably know. But the saturation level, people say, oh, Guangdong is saturated with infrastructure. It's not yet. But places like Shenzhen and maybe Guangzhou possibly are. And I think you're probably right. There's a heck of a lot of investment going on in rural areas in order to bring them up as well. So it's probably a good thing. 35 years, though, Guangdong has been the #1 trading province of China. Why Guangdong? Why for 35 years? Yeah, I get that the Shenzhen and the Zhuhai places were open, but what's special about Guangdong?
Well, as they opened up, it was not only Shenzhen and Zhuhai. It burst out into other areas of Dongguan and Jiangmen around us near here. Zhuhai, not so much development, but a lot of factories around Zhongshan making all sorts of things from hardware, parts, lighting, all different sorts of things, and exporting them to the whole world. So it wasn't only the development of Shenzhen and Zhuhai, that was just the spark to kick it off. But the rest of Guangdong province has, I think, grown off the back of that, and quite quickly, because they saw their opportunities. And we're talking, 30 odd years ago, people were very poor here in China, and they saw an opportunity, and they had no regrets or worries about doing hard work, and worked very hard for it. And that work ethic has kept going till now. People in China work very hard, and they put all their effort into trying to develop their family life back home, but they're down here in Guangdong province working very hard.
Yeah. So you came here 25 years ago, and you just made the point, people were poor and therefore salaries were low. So as an Australian businessman coming here to run a company or to help manage a company, one of the reasons was low cost. Is that still the case?
I think the cost is still relatively low compared to Australian salaries or many Western countries' salaries, but the salaries are certainly rising. And also the fact that people aren't coming here anymore, or not as many are coming anymore, means that factories have to adapt and mechanize and automate. And I think that is helping to maintain a relatively reasonable cost for manufacturing here in Guangdong.
Right. So do you think that it will remain? I heard Tim Cook a little while ago saying that he doesn't stay in China because of the low salaries or the low cost. He stays in because of many other things. Are you in the same boat where the cost of actual manufacturing isn't really the major component?
No, far from it these days. I mean, in those days, a lot of product was low quality. These days, some of the best quality products are produced here in China. And if you compare, in my field, ceramics, there's manufacturers such as Toto in Japan and Duravit and Laufen in Europe who are high-end manufacturers, but we have factories here that produce product of equal quality, although it doesn't have the reputation.
So you've just been to visit some of your factories. Where did you go? You were away last week, right?
I was away last week, was on a trip up to Shandong province to see a manufacturer of pressed steel baths. And we do a lot of our sourcing from Chaozhou for ceramics. So those two locations I visit a bit.
Okay. The only ceramics I know usually contain coffee. I'm not an expert on your type of ceramics at all. In fact, I can't think. I've been into hundreds of factories, but I don't think I've ever been into the sort of factory that you manage.
Well, based on cost and labour availability, we had 4 factories here in Zhongshan when I first came. We have none now. They've all moved off to other locations or closed.
Have they moved to other locations in China or in Asia?
In other locations here in China.
Right. So I know
Uh,
that a lot of people move to places like I have friends in the shoe industry, for example, and they've nearly all gone to Vietnam and Cambodia,
yeah, yeah,
and thousands of jobs. You mentioned it. They're transiting now. They're changing what they do, manufacturing
absolutely.
different things.
Yeah.
Mm.
The ceramics industry traditionally is pretty hard, hot, heavy work. And younger people these days, as I said, in the early days, people would do whatever needed to be done to earn money. These days, the more educated younger people are not prepared to work in those sort of heavy industries. The
Hmm.
heavy industries are under a lot more control to make sure the environment's looked after. So if people want to produce those sort of products, they either have to move offshore or they have to mechanize and clean their act up. And that's what's happening
Okay.
in Zhao.
This is Robert Ame. Robert actually contradicts what you're saying. Maybe not. Work ethic in China is higher than the West. Do you see that changing?
Uh, for that hard, heavy work, I think they're not prepared to do that. The younger people who have options are not prepared to do that, but they still work very hard when they're working in businesses. I mean,
Mm.
a lot of the tech businesses have like working from 9 in the morning till 6 at night, 6 days a week, or 6 in the morning till 6 at night, 6 days a week. So the expectation is still very high, and I think a lot of people still comply with that.
Yeah, I think Jack Ma got into a bit of trouble about that one. The 996, I think it was 9 a.m., 9 p.m., 6 days a week. So
Mm.
you just made a very valid point there, because China is in a crucial phase in its economic transition right now. It's changing from being a cheap, all you can get one-stop shop for manufacturing into a financial trade, digital trade, electronics, high-end tech. Do you still have an optimistic outlook about China?
Yeah, I do. I know we hear a lot of things about China has peaked and that their economy is in trouble and all the rest of it. But one of the differences is, I mean, the rest of the world is afraid of the word communism, and
Hmm.
it's the Communist Party here in China, so it's got to be bad. And in fact, they've changed their still called the Communist Party, and they probably always will be out of respect to those who set it up in the beginning. But they are a country with a system of socialism for the improvement of mankind as a whole, and they want to try and spread that. And when you look at things like the Belt and Road initiative, which started in 2013, you've now got, I think, about 157 countries signed up. And when you look at the UN, I think there's about 190 odd countries are part of the UN. You've got 157 countries that signed up, not because they were forced to do it, but because they want to do it, to be a part of that, because they said the development and the attitude of China is they don't want to take over anybody as far as militarily is concerned. They want everybody to develop and become a better society throughout the whole world. So
Yeah, I saw a great comment from one of the one of the Arabic leaders, who said that what China does when it develops is it leaves infrastructure there. So when the West go into a country, and historically this has generally happened, they will take away all of the resources of that country, the agriculture or the minerals or the oil, whatever it is that they're in that country for, they take it away. And the only thing they leave is poverty. Whereas
yeah,
China is building a hospital, it's building schools, it's in creating education. And I know that's kind of it's not a nuanced look at the whole thing. There are problems. I do know that. I get
oh,
that. But it
absolutely.
does seem to me like the way that China's approaching it is very, very different to the way historically that colonialism approached how they grew. But it's a new kind of, people are still calling it neo-colonialism, but it's a very different style. You agree?
Oh, very much so. There's no demand by China for any country to
Mm.
follow a political bent or a religious or even philosophical way. What they want is they want people to develop and work together with each other and become friends with each other, and it
Yeah.
benefits both sides.
Have
And
you
yeah,
seen that happen
China did
inside of
reform.
China?
Yeah, I have. Um, go back to the COVID thing. I mean, as soon as COVID broke out, you had groups of, and I'm certain it wasn't the government was pushing them to do it. I'm certain they were asking them to do it, but people volunteering from various parts of China to send medical teams to Wuhan to try and help them through their problem with that. Anytime that there is a disaster with flooding or landslides, there's one in Yunnan, I think, this morning, and there's people coming from all over the place to assist with digging out and medical teams and so forth. So yeah, it happens very much in China. It's very much part of the society here. They look after it.
My experience, I've been involved with poverty alleviation quite a lot, and the way I see it, richer cities, because we come from a relatively rich, and in terms of the Greater Bay Area, I think Zhongshan is the smallest or one of the smallest of the economies, so it's not that rich. But if you compare it with, say, a small city in central Hunan or Sichuan, it is quite rich. And there's a lot of things happening where one city will kind of partner with another city that's poorer, and they will help. I know that interesting aspects of this. We actually have Zhongshan has a football team in Xinjiang where they bring footballers from Xinjiang, it's not a province, it's a region, to come and play here in Guangdong. Just kind of crazy little things like that. They seems to me like the Belt and Road is an expansion of that philosophy, where a poorer city gets the assistance of a richer city. Now we've got poorer countries getting some benefit from China's wealth.
Very much so, very much so. You look at what they've done in Pakistan. There's been a lot of work done in Pakistan, and it's improved the infrastructure in the country immensely, and they're very, very grateful for what they're getting out of it, because not only are they getting the infrastructure, their people are getting the education from Chinese companies on how to go about doing these things for themselves.
Yeah. And you mentioned before that you were misinformed when you arrived in China. I can remember the same thing. I arrived in 2004, and my very first day, wow, it was like, wow, they've got supermarkets and they've got shopping centers and they've got cinemas, and wow, I didn't realize that. It was like, maybe they're not all farming with these funny shaped hats and pulling their bullock carts. It was a really strange thing for me to find. So what do you reckon on the misinformation? Has it got better, or do you think it's getting worse?
I think it's on the improve right at the moment, because COVID is over and we can travel and people are coming here. I think I mentioned to you earlier on, I follow a couple who have built a boat in Xiamen, American couple called the Winds, and they've recently traveled to China and lived in Shenzhen, in Xiamen for a little while their boat was being built, and it gave them the opportunity to travel in the local area, and it sparked their curiosity and their interest, and they've just done a trip from Xiamen by train, because they haven't had high-speed train access before, and they've gone up to Yunnan province and gone to Lijiang city, which is a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous location, and they can't stop talking about how friendly the people are, how helpful the people are, how safe everywhere that they travel is, and how wonderful the sights are to see. So I think they have access to a huge audience, and I think more of that, where the truth about China is actually put out by people from America or Australia or other countries, and especially with the video, where you're actually seeing everything that's going on and their interaction with the local people, is going to help improve the understanding of China, and I think knock down the ability of many countries to rubbish China the way they have in the past, especially over the last couple of years during COVID, where you had no travel. And I think it happens better on a normal people, one-to-one basis, than what it will ever do between governments of countries.
Yeah, I think that's what Xi Jinping mentioned when he went to San Francisco. He wants people-to-people exchanges. And I know that's already happened with visa. Australia doesn't have it yet, but several countries, including most recent one was Ireland, visa-free travel. But also anyone in the world can travel into Hainan Island for 30 days, visa-free.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. If you want to come to China, go have a look at Hainan Island. It's completely visa free. But of course, Hainan Island is it's an interesting place. I just spent about 3 months ago. I spent 3 weeks down there, and it's a microcosm of China. You've got little pieces of China, but little pieces of other countries as well seem to exist side by side, including Russia. There's a lot of Russian influence in southern Hainan Island, which has struck me as strange. But yeah, anyone can come now and have a look. I think that's the important thing. What
people need to understand is that China, although it is one country, it's a long way short of being one country. There are so many different populations with so many different cultures and foods and language that has managed to be brought together and stayed together, and is still, with all those different, I know people look on Chinese and say, well, they're all Chinese, but they are very different groups of people, and they've joined together and are happy to be together and have no intention of not being together. They are part of one country, but it's really a huge mix of many different nationalities and cultures that works.
What do you think creates that unity? Because that's quite unusual. If you go to other countries, like for example, if you go to America and Australia as well, in Australia in particular, you have the Vietnamese in one community, the Lebanese in another community, the Indians in another community. What creates that unity in China?
I really can't put my finger on it. I think that some of it is especially in development over the last 50 years or so, is that there's no divisions between people. If I need workers in the factory and I need them, they come from Sichuan or they come from Yunnan, it doesn't really matter. I need them in my factory to work, and they can earn a good money, and they live and work together with each other and understand there's no differences between each other. And I think that's maybe it. It's the familiarity. It's the fact that they're not separated, and the fact that they're all pushed in together in that factory, that they learn to understand, well, those from Yunnan and those from Hunan are not so different.
Yeah. This is one answer to the question. Confucius may be one of the answers to the question. Another one, I think, is the commonality of the language. There was a problem. There has been problems, and the West likes to harp on about this. Teaching Chinese in Tibet. Well, yeah, because Tibetans are Chinese. Teaching Chinese in Xinjiang. Yes, because the residents of Xinjiang are Chinese. They need to learn that language. So I think a commonality of language is one. And Confucian.
I think it certainly helped to bring people together, yeah.
I feel safe. Oh, this is another one. Trevor says this one. I feel safer in China than any other country I've been to.
Well, Trevor, I'd have to agree with you. There's parts of Melbourne and Sydney where I wouldn't go out at 10 o'clock at night. And I know that I can go anywhere here 10 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not going to be bothered or feel unsafe or harassed by anybody. And that's an experience of 23 years, not of 6 months.
Yeah, I felt when I first came to China, there was only one place I didn't feel very comfortable in. And I used to have to travel across the border at Lohu in Shenzhen. And I never felt comfortable there. I always felt it was a little bit Wild West, except it's in the East. But it's even that now.
Certainly, there were parts of Dongguan in the early years that were a little bit sketchy. But these days, where people are economically or financially secure, certainly not rich, but I mean here in Zhongshan, majority of people have their own home or a car. It's getting similar to a lot of Western countries in their affluence, and jobs are readily available. Even though there's talk for the younger people that there's not enough jobs available, there's certainly plenty of people in Zhongshan looking for work, looking for employees. So I think with that economic security, less people are inclined to be robbers or trying to hassle people.
Yeah, yeah. So certainly, my experience of crime, personal experience, I got robbed in my first month here. I was walking home from a bar, which I'm sure you would know the bar, and I just got approached by some people, and I lost my wallet, and I was carrying my passport in those days, stupidly thinking I need to carry my passport around China because it's an authoritarian state. And I lost my passport, which was a real pain in the neck because my visa is in there. Oh, yeah, that was a nightmare. But I mean, that was my first month in China. Since then, my father got same sort of thing. He had his pocket picked. A couple of kids hassled him, picked his pocket when he was here. But that was 20 years ago, almost 20. That was his first visit, so 2006, 2007. It's changed a little, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I was in a park in the north end of Zhongshan with some friends fishing for shrimp in a lake. And I had a mobile phone. I had a pocket in my shirt. And the mobile phone was too big. I was worried about the mobile phone falling into the. And I was sitting on a small landing on the edge of the water, so I just put the phone down on the landing between my feet, and I saw a little hand sneak through between my feet, grab the phone, and turn around. And this guy's bolting away with my mobile phone. So I went after him. I was a bit quicker in those days, and he saw this foreigner looming down on him, so he threw the phone to one side so that he could make his escape. So I went to get the phone, and a young guy bolted past me, hit him in the middle of the back, and rode him into the ground.
Wow.
And apparently the young guy was a plainclothes policeman. So my Chinese wasn't so great in those days, but he sort of dragged this young bloke over to me and said, "Do you want to press charges?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely I do." So we went across to the police station, and they sat this guy down in the back of the police station, and there was a camera where we could see him. And everybody who walked past, the police who were on duty, walked past and asked him something and give him a clip in the ears and keep on walking, sort of thing. And it came out that he was in Zhongshan by himself with no country people, none of his township people here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult to get jobs in those days. We would put a note on the front gate out of our factory, and there would be a queue of 100 people outside the gate for one position tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he was here and he couldn't get a job, and he was hungry. So he was trying to steal a phone so he could get some money and feed himself.
What ended up happening to him?
Coverage in those days. I mean, people were looked after by their country town people. Groups of people would come to Zhongshan, and they all came from a particular village or nearby a particular village, and they would look after each other while they were down here, and they would get together and make sure that everybody was okay, and somebody needed some help, everybody would help out. Yeah. There was no support from the government as such in those days.
I think more likely he would have been sent home. He would have been given a ticket to go home rather than prosecuted. That's
once I found out that, I said, look, don't charge him.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
Shirley has just put up this question, which relates back to Guangdong's development. I know who Shirley is, and she's currently watching or listening to the work report from the province, because we're in the 2 sessions right now. I mean, it only started a couple of hours ago. Development goals. One of them, we talked about rural revitalization. That's hard to say. Rural revitalization. How do you think that's going to affect business? Not necessarily yours, because yours is quite an expensive business, huge barriers to entry setting up your business. But do you think will there be investment potential in Guangdong's rural areas?
I think there's certainly room for investment and certainly room for revitalization. A lot of the rural areas that I visit, more so in Sichuan province, because I have friends there, there's nothing grown. There's lots of areas that are just left because there isn't the young people to do it. In areas where there's been poverty alleviation, a lot of things have been changed and mechanized, or people moved even to better land. So I think there's room for revitalization and modernization. I don't think it'll affect my business, as you say, but certainly potential for bringing more wealth to rural communities.
Yeah. I see a lot of people don't realize this. Guangdong, we see Guangdong now, we're looking at $2 trillion US, or just a shade short of $2 trillion US in GDP. And so you think of it as a rich place, but you made the comment a little while ago before we came online that there's only 27 million people in Australia with the same GDP. And here we are in China with 100 million people sharing that GDP. And we seem to forget because we think of the beautiful lights and the infrastructure of the Shenzhen and Guangzhou, but we forget there's a city called Yanfu, which almost nobody outside of Guangdong will have heard of. Everyone in Guangdong will go, of course we've heard of it. But no, outside of Guangdong, hardly anyone knows where Yanfu is. There's Yuan, there's Qingyuan is developing very nicely now because of its proximity to Guangzhou. But even 15 years ago, when I went to Qingyuan in 2014, there's areas of Qingyuan which are in the mountains and very, very poor. And it's a developing, very much a developing city.
My previous boss in the ceramics manufacturing here came to China in '82 for American Standard and helped them to build and set up a factory in Qingyuan for making of ceramics. And he said there was one street light in the middle of Qingyuan that they turned off at 10 o'clock at night. That was how undeveloped Qingyuan was in '82. He lived on frog porridge for the first month or so because he wasn't game to eat a lot of things, but also because they weren't eating meat and things every day. I mean, it was very poor in those early days.
Well,
so huge change now.
Yeah, in '82, I think that was pretty common throughout China. My wife was born in Zhongshan. I'm not going to say her age, but it was a while before '82. But what she experienced when she was born into a hut, basically wooden and bark for the roof. They used slabs of bark as the roof. And her father, in her childhood, her father built the first two-story house with his bare hands in the village. That's in my wife's lifetime, and she's. I mean, she's younger than me, but she's not old at all.
Yeah. A massive change. No other country has experienced the change that China has in the last 40 years. And I mean, things like the poverty alleviation, which basically the UN pretty much gave up on as unachievable, they've achieved here.
Yeah, that's true. Let's go back to one of the questions that I had in my list for you. The popular rhetoric, and I heard you mention the word peaked a little while ago. The popular rhetoric is that China has peaked and in fact, the popular rhetoric is that China is collapsing. What do you make of that?
I think it's wishful thinking on the part of a lot of the Western countries. They'd like to see China collapse because they're afraid of China's development. And they don't need to be afraid of China's development, in my humble opinion. China is not peaked. I don't think there is a peak. I think that as they move forward, they will continue to set higher goals, and the way they work on things, they will achieve them. I mean, one of the differences, and I'll come back, we were talking about socialism with Chinese characteristics, but the Chinese government has a long-term plan because they can. In Western governments, we change governments every 4 or 6 years or so, and those who come in are sort of criticising the last ones who were there and how they wasted money, and then they cancel contracts that have been set up and so forth. China has an opportunity because of their experience of their people in their government positions. They come up through the ranks. They're not celebrities or millionaires who have got their position because of their status or whatever. They've come up through the ranks and they've learned how to govern and how to develop areas, and they can set a plan for 50 years. And it used to be that Deng Xiaoping said, cross the river by feeling the stones. Basically, put your foot out there and feel where the stone is and take the next step. They don't do that. That's a long way away from that these days. They've got a plan and they move forward over decades with that plan. It's not something that they don't foresee problems, but they put the policies and adapt as they go along in place so that it doesn't have that devastating effect on them. And they're not chopping and changing all the time. They're continually moving forward. if they come up against a problem, they can veer around it and move forward, but they keep moving forward. I don't think there is a peak.
No, I want to just introduce this question because you and I are both Australians. You're more Australian than I am. I wasn't born there. But Australia's raw material exports have a marked effect on their GDP. Of course they do. Australia is I think, the only developed nation that has a trade surplus with China. They sell more to China than they buy. That basically relates to the very small population. They don't need to buy lots of products, but they're selling gas, oil, coal, bauxite, bauxite makes aluminium, and iron ore in particular. Shiploads are leaving. What do you think is the future for Australia and China's relations? Because we've had now two different sets of parliament that seem to be averse to trading with China. They love trading with China, but they seem to be averse to trading on good relations with China.
Yeah, the government relationships have been poor under a couple of leaderships, but basically it's pushed by basically America, and Australia being the size it is and having the long-term relationship with America tends to follow what America says, to the detriment of business, because a lot of businessmen have developed markets here in China and then lost that business because of China's retaliation to things that have been said. I think under Morrison's leadership, he sort of was pointing to the COVID virus and where it was developed in China, and they needed to own up about it. And straight away, of course, China said, well, we don't need that little bit of red wine that we buy from you, which is all of your sort of manufacture, and we're going to put the 200% taxes on it, and sort of killed a lot of the market. It's to the detriment of the business. I think the business people would love relationships to be better so that they can make more money. This current leadership is a little bit better and doing some effort to try and patch up some of the problems that have occurred. But that's going to go up and down as governments change, I think.
Yeah. Do you think it'll get better?
Unfortunately, I think it is getting better right now. I don't know how much Australia can ignore America's requests to not be a part of business in China. But certainly America has a very strong desire. I don't think there's any way that they're going to give up on being the number one hegemony in the world.
Well, they're clawing to keep it in place. Well, I think that's more the comment.
I think China's just going to continue on its path and move forward, and those who want to be a part of it will be happily accepted to be a part of it. As I said, with the Belt and Road, there's 157 countries have signed up to it now. And it's not
one of the things that worries me about Australia's business is, and Robert has just made this point as well, and I was going to say this just before Robert put in, the iron ore from Africa, oil and things coming from Iran. The other big one that comes out of Australia is coal. And I believe that China is, and people keep pointing this out, China is still building coal power stations. Yes, it is, but it has now 52% of its generated electricity coming from non-coal sources. Now, they still need coal. There's no question about that. They still need coal for production. When you're making steel, you need to have coal, and they're making a lot of steel. So they're going to stop using Australian coal one day in the future. They have already reduced Australian gas because when there was problems going on between Australia and China, America slipped in and signed, at the time, the world's largest deal for gas. Then I think United Arab Emirates or one of the Arabian countries signed an even bigger deal for gas. So if coal and gas are not coming from Australia, iron ore can be achieved from Brazil and West Africa. What's the future for Australia? What do they need to do?
I don't know what they need to do. They need to have a long-term plan, though, because Australia's ridden on the back of mining for years. It's where a lot of their wealth has come from. And it's a bit like the oil-producing nations. They have to try and make a plan to transition away from that, because the world is moving towards greener solutions. I don't know how they do it or what they do. Certainly, they would like to do a lot more with tourism and those sorts of things, but they're limited by the size of the country and the population, I suppose.
Yeah, there's the other problem. They seem to be not welcoming Australian tourists as much as they used to. Yeah. Having said that, my wife and her parents spent 3 months in Australia last year and had a wonderful time. They said there was no issues at all. You didn't feel like there was any problems. So on a people-to-people basis, it's still good. And
look, I've seen some prejudices with Australians towards Asian people, especially when down there with my wife, seeing it exhibited towards other Asians that were nearby. But then this guy who was doing so was fairly cowardly when he approached my wife, and I stepped up alongside of her. So,
good for you. Good for you. Let's talk about Zhongshan then. What's the future hold for Greg in Zhongshan?
I own a house here. I bought a house here in 2005. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, although I'm 65. Having lived here for 23 years, I've developed a fairly large friend base group who I enjoy my time with and want to continue my time with. So I'm not planning on moving away from Zhongshan at all. Zhongshan is a very good city in that it's not too big, but it has all the facilities. It's close to Hong Kong, so traveling to other parts of the world, for me, Hong Kong is even better than Guangzhou Airport. International flights out of Hong Kong, we can take a ferry from here to the inside of the airport and jump on a plane and go anywhere. So Zhongshan is a great place. I think it's still one of the cheaper locations for living, in housing cost, in food costs. In Guangdong province, I think it's probably one of the cheaper areas of developed Guangdong province. And I enjoy my life here, so no plans on moving away. And no plans on retiring at the moment. And if I do, my thoughts for the future is spending half of my time in Australia and half of my time in China. I don't plan on departing from China totally.
I don't even know if I'll spend half my time in Australia. I seem to be kind of locked into China now. Like yourself, people who know me will know that I'm in a different environment today. This is my first day in my new studio, so the lighting is not quite right. The sound is not exactly right yet, but that's all needing to be set up. So yeah, we're doing the same as you. We just bought a new apartment. The interesting thing is we haven't sold the old one, so now we're rich landlords.
Oh dear.
But the reasoning behind this is another question. The property crash in China, the rest of the world are looking at China and saying, oh, their property has crashed, their economy is going to crash too. But China actually caused this. And a lot of people don't realize China caused the crash to happen.
They did it to bring it down because it needed to.
Exactly.
And this is what I say, Jerry. Whenever there's a problem in China, they don't turn their back on it. They face it and they do what needs to be done. And they adapt and change their policies. And if people get hurt, people get hurt. But they need to do these things, then they do it.
Yeah. I think a few people have been hurt, but most of them are billionaires. And I think that's
exactly big
not a bad thing.
Development companies,
Yeah, the development companies, and I think 3 development companies went into liquidation or actually just closed their doors and stopped operating. And that has hurt a few billionaires. It's hurt a few bankers. What they call the shadow banking system, which is the illegal banking system, has been brought down by this. The property development system has been transited to a much fairer system. And the cost of accommodation has plunged. So we bought an apartment, and people around the world will probably go, oh my God, I have a 3-bedroom apartment, which we just paid 350,000 RMB for. That's 30,000 pounds, which is about $55,000 Australian anyway. In US terms, gosh, I don't know, maybe I don't know, 50,000 US dollars, something like that. And so we bought a nice little 3-bedroom apartment, which we can live in for the rest of our lives if we want to.
Yep.
And the reason we haven't sold the other one is because the price is at rock bottom right now.
Absolutely.
And I think it may come up, and we'll just wait a little while and we'll sell it when it's a better price. It's still worth more than we paid for it, which is interesting. I bought it more than 10, 12 years ago and paid 240,000. But the price is now worth only 30,000, maybe 35,000, 350,000, I should say. So I bought it for 240. It's worth 350. So people who are big investors have lost out big time.
Yeah.
Home owners, ordinary people, have really benefited from this.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. And the overall market will benefit from it, as you say, with the change to the whole building sector. The whole market's going to benefit from it, and it will stabilise the rest of the economy as well once this is sorted.
Yeah. There you go. Robert knows. The legislation was introduced just a year or two ago to change the criteria of property development, and that legislation, at the time it was introduced, 86% of property developers could not meet it. So they were given a deadline in order to transit to a new form of business, and most of them did. But some were too far gone. Evergrande is the example of that.
Yeah.
There's somebody coming in from Zhongshan, my mother city. Hi, George. Shichi, which is where I lived. Zhongshan Huaichao, less significant. I don't know. The Zhongshan Huaichao are less significant. Maybe slightly less significant than places like Zhuhai and Shenzhen, which are special economic zones, and Guangzhou, which is the capital, but certainly no less so than most of the other cities in the Greater Bay Area, I don't think. So one last question on the Guangdong development. Shirley, who's doing the listening in, NEVs, have you tried? Do you have an NEV?
They're awesome. I don't have one. I drive a petrol guzzler, unfortunately. But
you've had that a while, haven't you?
No, I got this one for about. I'm driving a Evoque at the moment, and I've had this for about 18 months. But a friend of mine has bought a Leap motor, and it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Her husband actually works in Qingyuan, and she travels to Qingyuan to see him, and it's costing her, I don't know, 20 cents or something, ridiculously low amounts of money to charge it, and saving her heaps on petrol. And it's got all the features that you could want in it, and it was 150,000 RMB.
I was in Dongguan last week, catching up with a friend of mine, Fernando, who people who follow me will know Fernando Furmubi on YouTube, and got into his car to drive from a restaurant to his home, and he hit the accelerator. And I used to drive police cars. I know what acceleration feels like, but I've never felt anything like this. We were in an SUV, a huge car. And Neo, he pulls a 2.5-ton caravan with this thing, and he pulls that all the way around China. And the car, when he didn't have the caravan attached, but when he hit the accelerator, I think he was just doing a little show off it. I went,
of course, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it's impressive. And it's not only the speed, but the quality of the car. The finish on this thing, 150,000. That's like 30,000 Australian dollars. You can't buy much in Australia for a new car in $30,000, and the finish and quality on the inside of the car and the build of the engineering and everything, it's awesome.
Yeah,
amazing.
Look at this one from Tube 4MJ, a BYD Atto, which is a nice car.
Yeah,
and he drives past fuel stations and charges off solar.
This is the thing that you can do here as well. one of the restrictions in other parts of the world is the charging stations, the infrastructure. It's just not set up. I saw a guy in America and he was saying, I've got to go on a 200-mile trip and I have to go actually 320 mile because I've got to drive from here over to here. I can't make it on one charge. I've got to drive from here over to this town to charge it up to be able to drive to where I want to go.
Yeah.
Whereas here in China, there's charging stations absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, with Fernando, what he did the other day when we were together, he said, I've got to just do a change battery. I said, okay. And as part of his package when he bought the car, he just drives it to a change station. And he just asks the car, tells the car I want to charge up, and it tells him where the nearest three, he can choose which one. And then he clicks on that and it books him in. It says there are 3 people waiting. You'll be 7 minutes in the queue, but it takes 6 minutes to get there. So literally we just drove there and there was nobody there. It was all done automatically. He reversed his car in and then the battery was changed. It was swapped out and the machine was telling him, don't worry, there will be some noise. This is normal. He left it. He doesn't need that on. He's heard it all before. But this is a fantastic system. Fantastic system, and it is literally all over. I once got a car journey I was in Shenzhen and I got a car back to Zhongshan and the guy had to stop for 20 minutes. He said, do you mind if I stop for 20 minutes because I don't have enough? I said, okay, I was just reading a book anyway, it's no big deal.
Yeah, but because there's so many being used here in China now, those systems are improving, like the change battery where you virtually don't wait at all. You go in and the time it would take you to fill up with petrol, you've already changed your batteries.
Correct, yeah. So it cost $32,000 on the road, and there was $5,500 in government rebates. So that's good to know. I've been reading.
Whereas in Australia, they're actually charging more for people who are buying EVs because they're going to lose their tax excise on the
road tax,
petrol sales.
Yeah. I was listening to an Australian radio station the other day, and there was a bit of a debate about NEVs going on, and it's not popular. And I understand why it's not popular in Australia. Most of the people calling into this station was saying, nah, mate, never get me in one of those things. You know, they burst into flames. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure that they do burst into flames at the whim of the driver, but it seemed to me that the biggest problem was what you just said. It was infrastructure. Yeah. It's not about the cars. They're great cars. They're a good price. But if you can't go more than, if you're driving in, let's say you're in Australia, I used to live in Brisbane. Then I moved to Sydney and my kids were still in Brisbane. So I would drive back every second weekend. Yeah. You've got to have petrol for that. And that's the problem with Australia.
It's improving. It's getting better. The distance that you can travel is getting better. But without the infrastructure, you're still going to struggle. You know, you drive here in China and you've got your GPS or Dalhang running and telling you where you're going to go. And while you're passing down the freeway, you get told. There's a petrol station in 2 kilometres. There are 7 charging stations. 2 of them are currently being used. So you know everything that's going on. If you're in your own house, you can have nearby your own house a charging station installed and you can charge it at home. You don't need to drive out to a charging station to get it done. So if you charge up overnight, you don't need to go near a charging station.
Yeah, anyone who's got a private house can have their own charging station built in as part of the package of buying the car. If you don't have a private house, but you live in a garden, as they call them here, so you're basically in a gated community, then usually you have allocated parking spots. It's much easier. Someone's asking me if I'm going to buy an EV. So Kenny, no. I haven't driven a car since 2005, so I've no intention of starting now. I ride a bike.
I am going to buy one. I do have an electric bike for running around. I keep it in the office and run around from the office with it. But I do intend on buying an EV because I'm so impressed with them.
Right. Oh, great. Well, we're coming towards the end of the hour. I have one last question, and we've already answered part of it, how people outside China view China. Are they right? I guess the last question, I'm going to change this a little bit. How do you think we, inside of China, can help people to see China as it really is without, because in my case, when I tell people this, they say, oh, you're paid by the CCP to do this. Well, I'm not. I wish I was.
Well,
But
yeah, I get the same thing. You've been in China 23 years. You're brainwashed. You don't see both sides of the story, but I do. How do you change people? Some people will never change. There was a friend of my brother's when I went back to Australia on a recent trip, and I invited him to come and stay at my house for a couple of weeks here in China. And I said, I'll pay half your airfare. Come over and stay for a couple of weeks, and I'll take you around, and then you can wander around yourself. I said, and you can see what the difference is. No, don't want it. China's not a good place. I'm not going there. So there are some people that you will never change. But for most of the people in my circles, if they come to China, they're immediately changed. They see a lot of difference. They still have some doubts. And I'm not saying China is perfect. China's got some things to improve on, and maybe some things that will never change. I don't know. But they're doing a pretty good job of improving the life of all of their people and a lot of people in some other countries. And I think all you can do is try and get a lot more of, as Xi Jinping invited, a lot more people-to-people exchange. That's what makes a difference.
Yeah, I think that's, you're 100% right. You'll never get an argument from me there. I'm surprised that when you say to someone, come and have a look at it for yourself, and then you offer them free accommodation, half their airfare, and they're so badly, I don't like to use the word brainwashed, but they're so misinformed that they believe that.
He thinks I'm brainwashed. And I said, well, I wouldn't be living here. Jerry, you know, I had a very bad hip, and a month or two ago, I decided I needed a hip replacement, or the doctor told me I needed a hip replacement. I had it done here in Zhongshan, and the service couldn't have been better. I was booked into hospital 6 days after I had the examination. They did a full check of my body to make sure I wasn't going to have a heart attack on the table or anything like that. All of the equipment in the operating theatre was brand spanking new. The doctor who did the operation has done it 400 times before, and that's what convinced me to get it done here. And within 3 days, I was back home after the operation. Within 5 days, I was driving the car. I probably shouldn't say that because it's probably not allowed. But anyway, after 5 days, I was driving the car, and up and down stairs. I've been back to Australia just recently and walking 2-3 kilometres. Absolutely fantastic. And this is going to last 35 years. I don't need another operation for another 35 years.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you the question. Is that because you're a rich foreigner? That's the question that you would be asked.
The cost was about a third of probably what I would pay in Australia. I paid it out of my own pocket because I could. It was 26,000 RMB, which is about 5,000, just over 5,000.
Just over 5,000 Australian dollars.
And when I was quoted,
US.
I said to the doctor, can I pay some more money and get a better implant? And he said, no. And I thought that's a bit unfair. And he said, what we use is the best that's available, imported from America.
So hang on a second. The doctor turned down more money?
Yeah.
This is not China. Surely you made a mistake.
Well, he did it in a different way. He said, well, we're already using the best. So if I knew what they were using and he said, I'll take some more of your money and still use the same thing, he would have been caught out.
Yeah.
That's
another thing that's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Trevor's in the UK, and he said, coming from Jerry's birth country, I was born in the northeast of England. I would say China's far better than the UK. It's different. It's
different. It's different.
Yeah, definitely easier to live here.
Certainly. A lot of people immigrated from China because it wasn't so nice 20, 30 years ago. And a lot of people that I talk to go to other countries and said, yes, it's nice to visit, but I'm coming back home to China because that's what I love.
Yeah, well, George is making this comment. One trip to China came back a very different person, half American, half Chinese, American, British Chinese of 3 halves. Very, very proud American. Doesn't take long to
No.
come to China. But let's have a look at this. The next comment. Unfortunately, he's forgotten that, and he has been re-brainwashed.
Well, again, we've got to encourage as many people to travel as we can, I think, and make up their own mind. And I'm convinced that anybody who comes here and really looks at things, really looks at lifestyle and the safety and so forth, will be convinced.
Okay, so the bottom line for this discussion, China is not collapsing.
No.
China is a good place to do business.
Absolutely.
It's a good place to live.
Yes.
And you're optimistic about the future.
I am optimistic about the future. I think China's ability to look at the future and make plans and move forward accordingly will keep them on the growth trail.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you very much for your insights into China. And
My pleasure, Derek.
I owe you a nice meal sometime soon.
We'll have a beer somewhere.
Or a beer somewhere, even better. All right. Well, we've hit the hour, so I'm going to say thank you very much and leave it at that. But I'm glad that you were able to talk to us. I'm happy to hear about your hip replacement and how well that went. And thanks very much for joining my take on China and adding your take. All right. Thanks a lot, Greg. And thank you, everyone. We had over 100 people viewing and good questions. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you all next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.